Good morning. Welcome to the fourth and final day of our customer conference and today's session, Finding a Revenue Cure for the COVID Hangover, presented by Utilligent. Before I introduce your speaker for today, I've always got a little housekeeping I have to go over. So on the right side of your screen, and I know you guys have heard this all before, on the right side of your screen, you're going to find a chat and a Q&A area. Please use that chat area to have an open dialogue with us or other attendees. If you have a question for today's speaker, please post that in the Q&A area so we can keep all the questions in one place. We will answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of the session. The session is being recorded and will be on demand within a few hours. If available, you can find any relevant downloads for this session just below this main presentation area. Your speaker today is Bob Cooke. Bob is a recognized industry leader across all aspects of customer engagement and meter-to-cash functions. His passion is for a true utility customer partnership where it is easy to do business and the interaction experience is tailored to each customer. His 20 years of utility experience spans electric, gas, and water in regulated and retail environments across investor-owned utilities, co-ops, and municipalities in single city or multiple state locations across North America. He has produced innovative and sustaining solutions through operational assessment, process engineering and optimization, organizational design, cultural conversion, employee edification, technical enhancements, and performance management. Bob, I want to thank you for being a part of this year's conference, and if you're ready, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. And good morning, everybody. I'm Bob Cooke with Utilligent, an operations and technology management consulting firm focused solely on utilities. Thank you for joining me as we walk through the Finding a Revenue Cure for the COVID Hangover. Let's start with today's revenue perspectives. Revenues are down because bills aren't being paid. Customers are playing dodge bill. We condition them not to pay by continually telling them, don't worry, we won't shut you off. Non-payments have soared upwards to 25% of monthly billing, and payments over 90 days past due have over doubled, and final bill debt has gone uncollected. Our customers have ghosted us. They're not paying, they don't pick up the phone, they're not answering emails, and they don't respond to texts. When we try to collect a payment, we're the bad guy on the front page or the prime story for the evening news. Our hands are tied by regulations, and our investors are looking for their returns. So how did we wind up here? In March of 2020, 25% of U.S. workers faced reduced hours, furloughs, reduction in pay, forsaking commissions and bonuses, and most impactfully, job loss. 22 million Americans had applied for unemployment, and the Fed was forecasting about 32% unemployment by the end of second quarter. Now, unemployment is not the only factor impacting our customers' ability to pay. It's important to understand the breakdown of our population and how it interprets into an active workforce. First, let's look at everybody who's excluded from the workforce. That's 70 million out of 330 million, or 21% of our population. This category is comprised of kids under 16, personnel in the military, prisoners, or those folks in nursing homes or with institutional care. Next, these are folks who could work, but they aren't considered in the workforce, which is about 95.5 million folks, or 29% of the population. This includes those who are retired, those who are disabled, students, homemakers, folks that have stopped working to care for family, or those who have just stopped looking for work in general. Just about all these guys have utility bills, but have very limited resources to pay them. Finally, we have those folks that are eligible, and they're eligible to work and actually in the workforce. This is about 165.5 million of our population, or 50% of our entire U.S. population. Either they're working full-time, which is good for paying bills, or they're working part-time, which means they're struggling a little bit to pay their bills, or they're not working at all, which is creating little hope of paying their bills at all. As we can see, in March of 2020, that equated to about 73% working full-time, 14% working part-time, and roughly about 27% of the workforce trying to figure out how to pay their bills, on top of the 29% that are eligible to work but not in the workforce. So that's actually a whole lot of financially stressed customers. And you can see it's more than just unemployment. And by the way, unemployment in April went up to 14.7%. So this shows a little bit of what the unemployment looked like in April of 2020 by state. And now it's insightful to look at employment by industry to gain a sense of who in your customer database may be impacted and who needs help. It's like leisure and hospitality, which is restaurants, hotels, and entertainment events, and transportation, utilities, and the professional and business services, which is all of our supporting infrastructure. It's also important to understand what the income distribution is, knowing that up to 40% of your customers are in the low income brackets, and those are the segments of customers that need our help the most. In response to the dire unemployment outlook and the shuttering of businesses and the home confinement, widespread mandate and voluntary moratorium actions were enacted. And these actions included things like all dunning and collection processes were paused or suspended. Disconnect for non-pay was suspended. Customers who were shut off for non-pay were reinstated, and final bill customers, all the final bill collections were halted. The uniform message was, don't worry about paying your bill. Your services are staying on. All those factors culminated into a forecasted payment behavior shift, which has actually come to pass. We forecasted in March of 2021, we would see customers that paid on time would decrease by 25%. Customers who needed assistance or reminders would increase by 6%, and this actually came in higher. And those who stopped paying would increase by 20%. Let's fast forward to now. The looming question for utilities throughout the pandemic has been, when will the moratoriums end? Well, one of the good leading indicators for resuming standard collection actions had been looking at the map of statewide mask mandates. In May of this year, when a significant number of vaccinations had been rolled out, about half the states had some form of mask mandates and the other half didn't, a hint that things could be getting back to normal soon. Last month, only Hawaii had a statewide mandate and 9 other states had a masking requirement based on certain vaccination criteria. So things definitely seem to be getting better. These next few slides provide a U.S. view regarding moratoriums and the suspension of disconnects. Here we see, as of the end of March 2020, 27 states had a disconnect moratorium in place, while the other 23 states deferred to the discretion of individual jurisdictions and incumbent utilities. In March of 2021, 14 states had active disconnect moratoriums, 20 states allowed the moratoriums to expire, and the 17 states deferred to voluntary actions. Those states with expired moratoriums proceeded cautiously with collection actions and prudent disconnects. In September of this year, only 5 states had active moratoriums, with 29 states allowing the moratoriums to expire, and the same 17 states deferred to voluntary actions. So today, collection actions and disconnects are becoming more prominent and have a semblance of getting back to standard business practices. This is a U.S. employment view over the last 20 months. You can see how 2020 started at 3.5% unemployment and then in April peaked at 14.8% and then began to stabilize in October with a slow and steady decrease to where we are today at about 5.2%. This view shows the shift in the workforce over the last 18 months. You can see here more of the population is excluded from the workforce, but in converse to that, we see that the population has increased, so that could be a lot of babies being born from the work-at-home crowd. And then we have the eligible not in the workforce. We see that that has jumped by roughly about 3 million. And then those in the workforce has decreased by about another 3 million. So we have less people in the workforce than we had a few months ago. The other factor that we're seeing is, yes, unemployment has gone down, but the part-time percentage has gone up. So more of the workers that are at their jobs and working are working part-time, not full-time. And although the unemployment rate has rebounded from 14.7% to 5.2%, the travel, restaurant, and entertainment industries are continuing to recover, And those small businesses that have survived are slowly making their way back. We still have a long way to go. You can see the shift in unemployment by industry, and that the low-income families still represent about 40% of the thresholds of the households. And all of these factors provide insights as to how your customers are struggling to pay and why your cash flow is suffering. So how has all this impacted utility revenues? In the first 6 months after the pandemic began, residential usage increased by 15%, while the commercial usage decreased by over 10%. That's a result of more time at home and less time at the workplace. And although these percentages are lower today, there's still a higher residential usage due to the increased shift to remote workforce. At the end of last year, we saw that there was an increase in aged arrears that was upwards to about 300%. So that means 3 times as many people are going delinquent than they were before. And in this particular side, in this sampling, we can see how the arrears aging is transitioning from how the inventory of older debt is growing. So what we can see here is the buckets from 91 to 180 days old is going up, and the older buckets are going up, and that's going to increase because they keep rolling into the older and older age buckets. So once a customer becomes more than 3 bills behind, their payback capabilities diminish significantly. They go from hapless, where everything's okay, to helpless, where they don't know what it is that they're supposed to do, to hopeless, where it's, why bother? It's no use. And with our customers now having up to 18 months worth of arrears, they're in the hopeless stage. And it's our goal to let them know that there is hope and there's help to get them back on track. So what do we do if we can't disconnect? The first form of action is positive priority messaging. We have some sampling here from some utilities across the US. We try to reinforce to the customer that they can do this and that we're here to help them. And we provide positive messaging that it's not hopeless. There's a variety of programs designed for them. And together, we can go ahead and solve this. So the message is, we've got your back and we can do this thing together. Now, to effectively engage our customers, we need to understand their behavior and what we need to do to engage them and how to encourage payment. So in this particular chart, we can see that we've got different customer behaviors. We have those who are paying. Those are our great customers, and they can pay and they do pay. And our goal is to keep them paying. We want to maintain their payments. And to do that, we reward them with appreciation and recognition. Make sure we thank them, let them know that their money is helping not only the community, but other folks that are struggling to pay their bills. And so it's a friendly reminder to let them know that we're here to help them in case anything goes awry and they need some help. Then we have the segment that has stopped paying. So we have some customers that can pay, but don't. So our goal is to restart them paying. And either we can restart them paying by doing some prompting, which could be an email, a call, or some sort of alert or notification. And then we provide them touch points. So on a monthly basis, they may get some sort of notification from us that reminds them, oh, yep, I need to pay my bill. Or that we can help them with some sort of payment program. So either this is auto pay or some sort of budget plan or something that helps them on a routine basis pay their bill. So we present them with these payment and restructuring options so that they feel comfortable that they're engaged and can pay their bill. Then we have those that have stopped paying. Some of them have stopped paying because they just can't pay. And our goal is to help them pay. They can pay with some sort of funding, some supplementary income, or some discounted rates. And it's our goal to direct them to the supplementary funding or to the subsidy programs to help them out. And in our final group, we have those who can pay and won't. And so the goal here is to enforce consequences. So the consequence is that, look, if you don't pay your bill, we're going to either disconnect you or in some cases, report you to the credit bureau. And so we apply these service and credit repercussions to them. And the messaging is serious messaging. It's serious and urgent. You need to pay your bill and you need to pay it now. And then we have those that will just never pay. And so we have to take action to reduce loss. So these are the number one people on our disconnect list. And the message is you need to pay now to avoid disconnection on this particular date. And we let them know where and how to pay. So what do we do? What are some recommended actions? So from a behavior perspective and from a servicing perspective, we need to transition from our old dunning processes, which were disconnect prevention, meaning this is what you need to do. You're late. You're really late. If you don't pay, you're going to get disconnected. Now you're going to get disconnected. We need to transition from that to payment encouragement. We know what it is that you need to do to help pay your bill. So our collection treatments need to change from collections to payments. And so the first thing saying you're past due, the first message would be, here's how it is we can help you pay your bill. The next is to develop affordable payment arrangements that include the current bill plus arrears. So what do we mean by affordable? First of all, no down payment, because if I'm struggling to pay my bill, I'm not going to be able to come up with a down payment plus whatever my current bill is. And I get a little bit of breathing room for the next bill. The next is consider only charging a percentage of an average monthly bill to make it affordable to the customer. So if my average bill is $100, then I'm going to charge you $125, $25 towards the arrear, because $25 is affordable rather than saying, look, you're going to have to make a $200 down payment and you're going to have to pay $200 a month for the next 6 months. So this may elongate what the payment period will be, but it makes it more affordable to the customer. Typically with payment arrangements, 40 to 60% of all payment arrangements are broken. But with affordable payment arrangements, 85% of affordable payment arrangements are kept. We need to continue to guide customers to their financial assistance programs and walk them through the application process. So it's not good enough just to give them a number or to tell them where it is that they need to go, but they need to be handheld to fill out the application and submit it because a lot of the breakage comes in the follow through on the customer's behalf. And then if a customer is already enrolled in a particular program or financial assistance, consider auto-enrolling them into the next year's program so that it relieves the burden from them of having to do something and you can continue to have that support for them to help them pay their bills. Create a specific customer hardship group that can deal with the specific needs of that customer. So you don't have to put the burden on your regular customer service agents, but these folks are trained to deal with what the options are and tailor them to that particular customer. And then finally, take a look at what supplemental payment programs might be. And some of these that folks are considering are flat rate programs. So if I'm paying, my average bill is $100 a month, maybe I can't afford $100. So perhaps I can pay $50 a month for 3 months to get myself on track, and then the rest is deferred into an affordable payment program. The other thing to consider is only show what the current amount due is. It could be overwhelming for a customer to see, yeah, my current amount is $100, but my total due is $1,600. So consider getting them on track and paying that $100, and then we can take a look at what that arrears and the total balance is and work with them later on to get them on an affordable payment program. And lastly, many utilities in some states have bill credit and forgiveness programs. So these programs, like an arrears management program, will have a customer pay whatever their current month bill is. I might pay $100, and if I pay $100, then I'm forgiven $100 of my debt. And some companies have, I pay $100 and maybe $50 of that month, as long as I continue to pay every month, goes towards paying off my debt. And some of this is subsidized by the community because the community will provide a grant that has that arrears payment option in it, or it's done by ratepayers like in the state of California or in the state of Maine. Or some, like Xcel Energy, has shareholders that fund this because shareholders believe it's better to get 75 cents on a dollar than no dollars at all. Some other options to take, are to develop outreach campaigns with offerings. So the customers aren't going to call you necessarily since they've ghosted us. So we've got to do some outreach to them. And as we saw in the chart earlier, there's certain behaviors that would create different types of target offerings. So based on the customer segment, profile, and delinquency, create these offers and communicate to the customer based on the kind of platform that they like to interact with you. For instance, some customers respond to texts, and some respond to email, and some respond to phone calls. Many customers aren't even going to answer the phone anymore. So take a look at what platform and interaction channel works for your customer and make that offering through that particular channel. And consider just engagement programs. So if you have a customer who has not paid you in the last 18 months, get them engaged with you. And a program may be every month, we want for you to respond to let you know what your financial situation is. And as long as that customer engages with you on a monthly basis, then they have some sanction from disconnect actions. Build relationships with your local community and charitable organizations. And there's many out there between the churches and the Rotary clubs and the veterans organizations. There are many out there that you can direct customers to that'll help those customers pay their bill. And communicate what contributions you're doing within the community so that they feel good. They, number one, see your presence, and number two, feel good about what you're doing in the community to help the community during the things that are going on throughout this pandemic. And lastly, coordinate actions with other utilities. A customer may have a different electric utility, a different water utility, and a different gas utility. You would want to make sure that you're all on the same page as far as when disconnects begin, what the different payment options are, and you don't want to compete with each other as far as who's going to get what payment first. And then we have loss mitigation. So if you have customers that aren't going to pay you at all, or you've got debt that has no option for recovery, what do you do with that debt? One of the considerations we've talked to several utilities about is to take a look at pre-COVID debt. This is debt incurred prior to March of 2020, and end the account at the pre-COVID period and start the account anew from COVID or March 2020 onward. And that way you can take that old pre-COVID debt and write that debt off and perhaps use your allowance for doubtful account funding to pay for that debt so that you're not continuing to accumulate and age that debt, but you can care for it and get it off the books. The other advantage that you have is if you final any of that debt, you may be able to send that debt to a collection agency and they can take actions like report it to the credit bureau or begin collections on that debt. So now it's time for disconnection. So what do we need to do? Number one, we had mentioned before, you need to communicate to your customers of what going into disconnection looks like. And so it's an example of Piedmont Gas said, we're going to return to normal business practices. Same thing with AEP, return to standard business operations. LG&E, this is what you can do to avoid disconnection. And then Jacksonville Electric, they resumed normal policies, including utility disconnects. So it's business as usual. These are things that the messaging is, there's nothing new. We're going back to what we used to do in the good old days. Remember, this is how you can avoid being disconnected. So you need to brace your customers for the resumption of disconnects. Communicate what resuming collection actions look like. Use all of your outreach and media options, paper media, social media, emails, and blaster calls. And for mailings, only send letters that are required by the regulators, and consider messaging and coloring on the outer envelope to get their attention. Start with pre-COVID debt and work your way down the balance ladder. Develop a special ops team, as we mentioned before, to handle escalations and exceptions. And this is really important. Only send disconnect notices to those customers that you intend to disconnect. There's nothing worse than having the behavior for a customer that says, I got a disconnect notice and nothing happened. Next month, a disconnect notice and nothing happened. And pretty soon they're conditioned to just ignore those disconnect notices. So make them effective. And then lastly, take a look at what your staffing plans are, because as you disconnect, there's going to be an increase in the volume of contacts, not just for the folks that you notice, but for the rest of the folks in the neighborhood. Since folks are working at home, there's going to be a shift in the day of the week and time of day that you're going to get these calls. You're going to have changes in procedures, and maybe your hours of operations are going to change to accommodate these additional calls and the time of day they'll be calling. And consider IVR messaging and special menu selections to route the calls to the appropriate place to have the right servicing and to avoid wait times. And from this perspective, make sure that you don't tax your field personnel with negotiating or collecting payments. Let them focus on disconnects. And consider door hangers. They're very visible and effective, and they let the community know that you're in the area. Actions for one customer causes others in the neighborhood to take action. And have an action plan for renters. They could be apt to flee, and they may require some sort of prioritization. Expand your monitoring for bankruptcies so that you can be first in line to get your claims, and then resume final bill collections, which have been paused for a long period of time, so that the collection agencies can do their job and recover any of that final bill debt. As far as reconnects are concerned, normal reconnection after disconnect is somewhere between 85 and 90%. If you have reconnect rates below 85%, that should trigger concern for fraud, theft, and diversion. So examine your applicants for service at the premise where that premise has had a disconnect for non-payment, because it's time for the customers to play the name game, where typically service will be put into a family member's name or a pet or something else. They'll transpose what the Social Security number is just to be able to get their utility service turned back on. So perform verification at the time of service application, validate the name, Social Security number, etc. Look for any previous history of that customer and any trailing debt that you can link to them when they start new service at that premise. And monitor the premises for use on an off meter, and keep an eye out for theft and diversion. Well, glad that's over. So in summary, expect up to 3 years for full recovery. It's going to take a while to get that aged debt whittled down or written off. So that's going to be a while for that recovery. It could be mid-2023 before current payments stabilize. Make sure you keep your customers engaged to maintain payment consistency. Make it easy and rewarding to pay. When you start disconnects, communicate the resumption of collection and disconnect actions. Work to develop a debt payback and forgiveness program so that your customers have options. Coordinate actions with other utilities in your area. Engage with those community groups and social agencies to help your customers pay their bill. And lastly, become a payment ambassador. Be an enabler that helps those folks pay their bill. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me through this session, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
I like that last slide, Bob. Elf is one of my favorite movies. All right, so we've got a couple questions for you. The first one being, do any of the considerations for payment enablement or disconnect avoidance require regulatory approval?
Yes, some of them do. We had mentioned earlier in the presentation about maybe flat rates and having a flat rate with some sort of deferred plan. So a flat rate could be considered a tariff rate. And so there may be some dialogue that has to take place with your regulators to see whether that needs to be put into the tariff or whether they'll allow you to have your customer have that flat rate.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next one we've got is, how do you determine customer segments and what's the process for targeting offers and programs?
So the best way to determine what that customer segment is to take a look at their previous behavior. So typically what we do is we look at anywhere between the last 24 and 18 months and what has that customer done in the past? Have they always paid on time? Have they slipped a month and then caught up? Have they paid because that they were on a particular program or that we notified them? So when you look at those past payment behaviors, that really helps you understand what future actions will work for that particular customer. And as we looked at that one particular matrix slide that talked about can pay and do and can pay and don't, those particular, once you group those customers into those segments, then you can help put offers together that are targeted to that particular customer that helps engage them and prompts them to pay based on what their past performance has been.
Okay, wonderful. I think that is about all we've got time for today. Thank you again, Bob, and thanks to the Utilligent team for being a part of this year's conference. And also thank you to our attendees for joining today's session. Do be sure to stop by the Utilligent virtual booth where you can find more information on their products and solutions, or if you want to send a direct message to a rep, you can do that right there if you have a question about any of their offerings. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next session. Bye, everybody.
Bye.